Hi there, I'm Wazza and this is Bike File, the show that tells you all you need to know about the best bikes on the market. And in today's episode, it's the turn of my favourite bikes ever. Yes, it's performance sports bike time. And in order to do some proper testing, I'm here on a Speed Freak track day with Jamie Whittam and his mates at Alton Park. So, let's see what's in the show. On this week's show, Rod is going to be going very fast on Kawasaki ZX12R. Louise is going to be going maybe not quite so fast, but looking very stylish on Derbi's GPR 50. And I am going to be going absolutely screaming bonkers on Honda's brand new CBR 600RR and the 2003 GSX-R1000. So here we have it at last, Honda's all-singing, all-dancing and much lauded CBR 600RR. The bike that has blown the 600 class wide open once again, because just when we thought 600s couldn't possibly get any better, Honda went and came up with this, the bike the rest of them now need to beat. While in any particular year your heart would be set on the ZX6, R6 or GSX-R6, when it came to parting with your money, your head just knew the CBR would do everything you wanted day after day without missing a beat. And this completeness as a package kept the Honda at the top of the sales chart since it was first introduced over 10 years ago. But sales success or not, the CBR really began to show its age in the last couple of years. Next to the Manic R6, it was plain old boring. Even next to the ageing ZX6, it looked a bit plain Jane. So, for 2003, Honda went to town. Capitalising on all they've learned in MotoGP with a certain Mr. Rossi, they went out to make the very most of this motorcycle in terms of styling and performance. And oh boy, have they succeeded. Forget the comfort, forget the fuel economy, forget all the mundane niceties for a minute, because the single most impressive thing about this bike is the handling. The new CBR's handling is excellent. It is edging ahead of everything else in its class, which up against such luminaries as the new ZX6 and the GSX-R600 is impressive to say the least. But to be honest, this could be the best handling production bike we've yet been blessed with. It is incredibly quick and accurate to turn in, and mid-corner, even when you're leant right over, you've still got stacks of options, which makes this one serious bike for track attack. But also, we are blessed again with some proper ground clearance on the CBR. It was always a bugbear on the old one, which tended to dig in as soon as you looked at a corner in anger. So we put this whole lot together and we are left with a bike that is absolutely stunning to ride, but you've also got that much feedback coming through the chassis that the confidence it gives you is legendary. Brakes aren't class leaders, however. Those honours go to the sublime and super strong anchors on Kawasaki ZX6, but they are the next best thing, so you can rest assured there's still a potent package of power and feel on hand. The motor at the heart of things is a gem too. Admittedly, the ZX6's 36cc mid-range advantage does mean the Honda isn't the strongest motor in the class, but for a 600cc lump it is in very rude health indeed. The fuel injection is excellent, and the precision and control you get between rear wheel and your twitching throttle hand is superb. Then of course there's the styling. This bike is horny. Whichever way you look at it, from that dinky rear end right the way through to the RC211VS dash nestled in that cockpit, this is a machine you can look at for hours. Obviously, practicalities have taken a slight kicking in the view of the CBR's new performance edge, but you'll be pleased to know that the comfort that always kept it a favourite is still pretty much there, although you are now pushed forward onto your wrists a little bit more, so town work's going to get a bit more painful. Elsewhere, that pillion seat back there is now a genuine sports bike afterthought item, and I'm not sure I'd fancy trying to bungee any luggage on with that exhaust pipe running under there. Then again, if it's practicalities you want, buy yourself a VFR. If it's the best 600 in its class that you want, buy the CBR. And so now it's time for the scores. Styling, Honda takes a 9 out of 10. This bike is absolutely beautiful. Performance, it's another 9 out of 10. It's only going to lose a point for that motor not being quite as quick as it could be. Comfort, 7 out of 10. It's very good, but it's still a super sports bike. Street cred, 8 out of 10. On the one hand, this is the must-have 600 for 2003. On the other hand, you're hardly likely to be the only bloke in your town who's riding one. Reliability, 7 out of 10. It's probably going to be higher than that because, as we know, Hondas these days are built very well, but it's an unproven bike because it's only just come out. Value for money, 8 out of 10. It's competitively priced, albeit at the top end of the 600 class, although a GSX-R600 will make it look a bit expensive. So there you have it, the CBR 600. It is as good as everyone says. And now it's time for something a little bit smaller because Louise is riding Derbi's GPR 50.
Thanks, Wazza. And now for a bike aimed at the younger riders amongst us. Those little race reps, well, love them or hate them, they are a teenager's dream. Now, there's 4 out there in the marketplace. Aprilia have given us that awesome RS50. Regis have given us the RS1. Motoroma have the RX50. And Derbi, well, they've given us this one. It's the GPR R. It's not the standard version, it's the race replica. Believe it or not, that bike is the only one in the country and we've got our hands on it today.
The GPR 50 is the direct result from a joint venture between Cagiva and Derbi. It uses the advanced Cagiva chassis mated to one of the finest 50cc engines currently available. Now, at the heart of the Derbi, there's a water-cooled 6-speed single-cylinder 2-stroke engine. It may sound like a hairdryer, but wait for this. It pumps out a hugely impressive 9 horsepower. Well, it may not have CBR riders quaking in their boots, but the thing only weighs in at 98 kilos, thus allowing it to move as quick around corners as it will do down the straight. Let's face it, if you're a red-blooded 16-year-old who's crazy about bikes, the GPR 50RR, that's this race rep version, is the machine to have.
Now, once sat atop this bike, you stare down at that dashboard and you could be forgiven into thinking you're staring into the face of a superbike. Such is the quality of those clocks and switches. It really is second to none. And that goes for the rest of the bike too. It's got upside down forks, there's an awesome rear shock, there's great brakes. It really is a well put together bike, and there's a few surprises in store. Now, it's only got that little 50cc engine, so you don't really need a big petrol tank, do you? Check this out. Under tank storage system. There's enough room in there to put a full face helmet. I like that. And just think, this bike is only a few £100 more than a 50cc twist and go scooter. Bargain.
The seat is nothing more than a piece of plastic covered foam slapped directly onto the bodywork, resulting in a rather firm feel. Now, couple this with the solid suspension, lightweight motorcycle and a fair old reach to the bars and high footrest. You may be looking good, but feeling good you ain't.
But anyone over the age of 25 should seriously think about the cost of those osteopath bills to go with it. Okay, it's a good bike, good performance, great handling, and it's a superb looker for such a small motorcycle. It's had absolute rave reviews, so let's check out our scores on the doors.
Performance, 7 out of 10. Don't be put off by the 50cc motor. You'll struggle to find any torque to speak of, but when you do wind this baby up, you'll discover a rather narrow power band of quite impressive power for a 50. As for comfort, 4 out of 10. Well, comfort doesn't really apply to this bike. You wouldn't want to travel any distance on it. Hell, you don't even want to sit on it for very long. 8 out of 10 for build quality. For any machine costing less than £2,500, owning this sum of parts is a pleasure. The bike scores 9 out of 10 for value for money, because there is a lot of bike for the money here, and it places the GPR firmly within the reach of those dreamy 16-year-olds. Street cred, a 7 out of 10. If you are that dreamy 16-year-old schoolboy or girl, the GPR is the ultimate in street cred. However, once you're out of your teens, you may just feel a little silly riding one.
And that's it from me and my little Derbi GPR. It's a lovely bike and I'd like to say I'm going to take it for another spin. I'm too cold for that. I'm going to leave all that riding business to Wazza. I'll see you soon.
And that was the Derbi GPR 50, the perfect bike for all you teenage hoodlums out there. Anyway, now it's time for something a bit bigger with Triumph's 955.
What a lovely, big, shiny, sporty bike this is. Or is it? The lines are good and sporty, there's a dinky digital speedo to mark the bike out as a child of the modern sporting era, and there sure is one fine bark from that end cam when you give it the berries. It even feels pretty light too, 188 kilos I think you'll find, and the riding position tucks you in better than your mum used to, without being too cramped. So far, so good. But what about the thick, clunky bodywork with that budget single-tone paint job? Or perhaps the wires and bits that stick out here and there whenever you peek behind a fairing panel? And as for the swing arm that looks like it's just come out of the school metal workroom, well, I ask ya. You buy as you Triumph, you go British, you get individuality, character, and in the case of the 955, a solid dose of handling and performance. But you also get a bike that ain't nearly as slickly finished as its Japanese competitors. It's just one of those Triumph things. They're a little more ruddy English rose than Oriental catwalk waif, that's all. Styling, 5 out of 10. Not as pretty as the original incarnation, not a bad looking bike, but I personally think it is a little bit bland. Performance, 6. Quite fast enough, as a genuine 166 mph top speed will tell you, and those brakes are quite simply superb, but the handling does ultimately limit how much fun you can have at the track. Comfort, 6. We could forgive the Triumph more if it were claiming to be a total sports bike, but it's not, and road bias sports bikes should be more comfortable than this. Reliability, 8 out of 10. Good, solid, workmanlike British quality, unlikely to go wrong. Value for money, 7 out of 10. This bike is nearly the same money as a GSX-R1000 and also a good slice more expensive than a new ZX9, which is a faster, more comfortable and better track bike.
Well, that's the end of part 1, but you are going to want to come back in part 2 because I'm going to be testing this here GSX-R1000. Rod is going to be out on a ZX12 and Louise is going to have more performance bike buying information than you can shake a stick at, so we'll see you in a minute. Welcome back to Bike File. Coming up in the show, we're going to have Louise with the buying tips on sports bikes, but now it's time for Rod's road test of the ZX12. After that, I'm going to be on this GSX-R1000, so I'm off to get ready.
It's not just the sculptures around here that have teeth. If you're a regular Bike File viewer, you'll know that I'm not the world's biggest lover of sports bikes. Personally, I have no interest in going everywhere at Warp Factor 8 and scraping my knee on the floor going around roundabouts. But when I first saw this Kawasaki ZX12R Ninja, I have to admit to a twinge of curiosity. Maybe the subtle styling of this bike could finally seduce me into buying a set of matching race leathers and some knee protectors.
If you have any interest in bikes, you already know about the reputation of Kawasaki's Ninja range. Blistering road burners out there on the cutting edge of performance, doing battle each new season with the latest upgraded Fireblades, Gixxers and R1s. Extreme sports bikes like this exist in a kind of cultural bubble, and if you love them and won't ride anything else. But how about the average rider coming to sports bikes for the first time? Would the big Ninja suit them? Would it suit me?
Now I've ridden the bike, I can confess to being utterly seduced by this motor, which is an absolute gem. The power kicks in straight away and just keeps coming, and it's utterly addictive. I have to say though that this bike is much, much faster than I am, and I'm not even going to try and explore the limits of its handling. What I can say is that it's solid as a rock and quite forgiving when I'm pushing the limits of my own performance envelope.
I also have to give Kawasaki a big thumbs up for styling. The bike looks at once lean, purposeful and predatory without resorting to tacky multicoloured graphics. That ram air scoop on the fairing nose may or may not help develop more power, but it don't half look mean. Likewise, the tailpiece and low seat, which invites you to drop deep into the bike and become one with it. In fact, I was beginning to enjoy this bike a lot when I was forcibly reminded of why I don't like sports bikes. Neck and wrist cramps are simply unavoidable for normally sized people, and I have a new admiration for the stoic single-mindedness of the Dayglow Leather Brigade who put up with it all.
The ZX12R is a good bike and possibly a great one. For £9,380 you get more performance than you could ever possibly use in a bike which is going to continually challenge you to raise your game. If that's what you're looking for, you won't be disappointed. Personally, I like to see the world go by in a bit less of a blur, but thanks anyway.
Those capable of exploring the limits of performance will no doubt have very strong views. As a non-sports bike rider, I'm not going to mix in with the argument, but in my limited experience I would have to score this bike at 10 out of 10 for performance. I now begin to understand that riding one of these bikes is more to do with sport than comfort. Thrilling, challenging and exciting, yes. Comfortable, no. 2 out of 10 for comfort. Judging by Kawasaki's reputation, build quality and reliability should present no worries. Any minor niggles will be swallowed up by the extensive warranty, and service intervals are 8,000 miles apart. An educated guess at 8 for build quality. Ride one of these and no one could doubt that you take your biking seriously. My mind is suitably blown. 9 out of 10 for street cred.
Well, that's enough sports bikes for me. Oh, but here's Wazza.
Well, that was the ZX12, but now it's time to go to Louise, who's got all the performance bike buying information we could ever want.
So, reckon you're a bit of a Troy Bayliss then? Or you could give Valentino Rossi a run for his money? If that's the state of your mind, then the chances are you own a sports performance bike. These bikes are Speed Freak specials. They're rocket ships with wheels. But are they as good as all the hype?
Performance bikes appeal to people who want the speeds and the thrills of the racetrack on the road. Bikes that are very, very fast and look very, very fast.
The styling is as sharp, and these babies handle, which is hugely important as you hurtle past in a blur of colour and noise. No, seriously, these beasties do look good, which is all important when you're hanging out at the track, swapping stories of daring do's and don'ts. But could you really live with one?
Running costs for the performance bikes is probably one of the most expensive, down to insurance more than anything. Fueling costs are similar across the board as far as CC goes, but you tend to find these bikes are grouped in the higher end of the insurance bracket. Alarms and immobilisers are more desirable for theft and that element, and you tend to find that these bikes are crashed more frequently, so it drives insurance costs up.
If you're planning on riding one of these speedy numbers to work every day, I'd think twice. They're not really the comfiest options available. Just remember, they're built for speed and performance, and a lot of home comforts tend to get lost in the quest for all-out speed. If you want to take your sports bike touring, then you're either very brave or very silly. Make sure your chiropractor is on hand to remove you from that bike after a particularly long stint. So, what are these bikes really good for?
Practical for the purpose to use for, but I wouldn't say it was an everyday bike. Just with the riding position, because you've got poor visibility in your mirrors. For example, you're looking over your screen, your head tends to be lower down than it would on a commuting bike. It tends to be more uncomfortable. You've got less control through the traffic because of the riding position. Not really a general everyday machine.
People will use them on cross-country routes. They're not. You wouldn't find a lot of people taking them out on the motorways. It's not what they're designed for. They are a cross-country bike where you can go down the A roads, the B roads, and you can really test the handling on them.
Well, these bikes are fun to play with. Thrash them on a Sunday afternoon, take them to track days, pose on the seafront with them. They are for riding hard and showing your mates a clean set of heels, or in this case, tyres. Basically, ride them like you're being chased by Anne Widdecombe in a thong. Go on, go to it, boys.
The new CBR 600 is all well and good, but if you want the most goddamn intense, over-the-top rush there is in motorcycling today, then this is it. The new Suzuki GSX-R1000. The spec sheet says it all. 170 kilos and just over 150 horsepower at the back wheel. That is enough to send even the hardest of riders into a panic attack. Fast doesn't even come close. Strapping yourself to a laser-guided missile would be much more like it.
Ever since it first rocked our world back in early 2001, the GSX-R1000 set new standards in power and handling. Acing the competition by at least 10 brake horse, it stomped all over the lot of them. The Fireblade may have been more accurate, the R1 better looking, but for brute firepower in a seriously capable chassis, the GSX-R left them all for dead. And in 2003, with the updated model, things have only got better.
The biggest Achilles heel on the old GSX-R1000 was always the front brakes. They weren't bad, but for a bike so fast, you'd have wanted them to be a little bit better. They may have been 6-potters as well, but they didn't quite have the power or feel needed for the job. For 2003, however, Suzuki have now gone down to 4-pot calipers, radially mounted, and the important thing is, they really do the business.
Over in the chassis department, the frame has gone down the traditional lighter and stiffer route, which seems to have cured the old bike's tendency to want to run slightly wide in faster turns. Now it dives in and out of any corner you care to point it at more eagerly than before, holding a more accurate line and being more controllable all round. How's about criticism? Well, she's still a physically big beastie, especially next to the Squat R1 or Slender Fireblade, and I'm not convinced about that new nose cone. But otherwise, the only other potential fly in the ointment is, can you handle it?
This is an awful lot of power and handling on offer here. And even though any bike is only as fast as the bloke or lady at the controls, sometimes this bike can just be a little too fast. What I'm getting at is that if you ride one of these on the road, you could find it a little frustrating, simply because you can never quite get near its limits. There's just too much of it. Even on the track, it'll take a very skilled rider to get near its limits. But then you don't buy a bike like this for pottering around. You buy it because it is the most intense and over-the-top two-wheeled experience that money can buy. And looked at that way, this bike is all there is to it. Now, let's have a look at the scores.
Styling, 8 out of 10. In blue and white it's gorgeous, in the brown and black we had maybe not quite so good, but either way it's still an impressive looking bike. Performance, 10 out of 10. Too much is never enough. Comfort, 7 out of 10. Perfectly bearable, very much fun. Street cred, 10 out of 10. It's got a 1000cc logo on the back of it. Everyone knows you are riding the most serious sports bike you can buy today. Reliability, 7 out of 10. Could be a little higher. Again, last year's model lasted very well indeed, so I don't think this one's likely to be any different, but we don't know for certain yet. Value for money, 7 out of 10. Fair enough, it's not cheap, but if you want this sort of performance, where else are you going to get it for this money?
Well, I'm afraid that's it for this episode of Bike Files, so it's time for us to love you and leave you from sunny Alton Park. However, do join us again next week when we're going to be out with a bunch of bikes that are just as mad as these, but not quite as fast. It's Supermoto time. Rod's going to be on a KTM Duke, Louise will be on the MZ Bagheera, and you'll just have to tune in to see what I'm doing. See you then.